I'm Samantha Michelle, 29, and I never thought I'd be sipping cocktails in the Maldives while my sister's wedding unfolded without me back home. But when my parents delivered their ultimatum, apologized to my future brother-in-law for calling out his disrespect or be banned from the wedding, I made a decision that shocked everyone, including myself. As the family's financial advisor who controlled our joint accounts, I had leverage they never saw coming. Before I tell you how I ended up on this beach instead of in a bridesmaid dress, drop a comment about where you're watching from and subscribe if you've ever had to choose between your dignity and family expectations. Growing up in Boston's affluent Beacon Hill neighborhood, our family dynamics were established early. I was the responsible one, straight-A student, serious planner, practical thinker. My sister Katie, 2 years younger at 27, was our family's princess. While I worked summer jobs and saved for college, Katie was encouraged to enjoy her youth. My parents, Richard and Diana Michelle, weren't bad people, but their favoritism was as predictable as New England winters. Samantha always lands on her feet, my mother would say whenever I faced challenges, as if my resilience justified less support. Meanwhile, Katie's smallest setbacks mobilized the entire family. When she failed her driver's test twice, Dad hired a professional instructor. When I failed mine once, I got a bus schedule. Despite this, I loved my family fiercely. We were close in that complicated way families often are, bound by loyalty even when fairness was in short supply. I excelled in finance, graduating from Wharton with honors before securing a position at one of Boston's top wealth management firms. My success became a source of both family pride and burden. Our Samantha, the financial wizard, my father would boast to friends at their country club, right before asking me to look over his investment portfolio or help Katie budget her persistently overdrawn account. By 25, I was managing not just my own substantial portfolio but also our family's joint accounts, the business account for my father's real estate company, my parents' retirement fund, and most relevantly, the wedding fund for Katie that had been growing since she was 16. My parents contributed monthly, and I grew it through smart investments. My financial skills became the counterweight to years of emotional imbalance. They needed me, and that felt like a form of acceptance. When Katie met Jake Thompson at a charity gala 3 years ago, I was genuinely happy for her. Jake came from a similar background, Dartmouth graduate, working in commercial real estate development, socially connected. He was undeniably handsome with his perfect smile and tailored suits, the kind of man our parents had always envisioned for their princess. Our first few meetings were pleasant enough. Jake charmed everyone with stories of his adventures sailing in the Greek islands and his plans to revolutionize Boston's waterfront development. I noticed his tendency to dominate conversations, but attributed it to first meeting enthusiasm. "Your sister is fantastic," Jake told me during that initial dinner, "but she tells me you're the family brainiac. Must be nice having all that financial security while Katie's still figuring things out." Something in his tone made me pause, but I brushed it off. We all have different paths. I'm just glad she's happy. As months passed, these subtle digs became more frequent. At Thanksgiving, while I helped my mother in the kitchen, Jake loudly wondered whether workaholics like Samantha ever regret prioritizing spreadsheets over relationships. During Christmas, he questioned whether my condo's value would continue appreciating, suggesting I should have consulted someone with real estate expertise before purchasing. Each comment came wrapped in just enough plausible deniability that confronting him would have seemed oversensitive. My parents never noticed or chose not to. Katie would occasionally shoot me apologetic glances but remained silent. The family dynamic shifted further when my father's business hit a rough patch last year. Without telling his partners, Dad asked me to, temporarily, transfer funds from our family account to cover operating expenses. I structured it as a loan with fair terms, documenting everything properly, protecting him while maintaining my professional ethics. This increased my control over our shared finances but also the expectation that I would always be the family's safety net. Meanwhile, wedding plans accelerated after Jake proposed with a diamond ring suspiciously similar to one Katie had bookmarked on my computer during a weekend visit. The 8-carat monstrosity cost more than Jake's stated annual bonus, raising questions I kept to myself. The wedding rapidly expanded from an intimate affair to a 3-day extravaganza at the Wentworth estate on the North Shore. Guest list, 350 people. Budget, initially $85,000, then $120,000, then whatever it takes to make it perfect. My parents contributed their share, but when costs balloon, eyes turned to me. You've always been so generous with your sister, my mother noted during a wedding planning lunch. And it's not like you're saving for your own wedding anytime soon. I agreed to cover the difference, adding another $50,000 to the wedding fund. Katie hugged me tearfully, whispering, "You're the best sister ever." I believed her gratitude was genuine, even as Jake remarked that successful women often find fulfillment in supporting others when their personal lives are lacking. The comment stung, but for Katie's happiness, I maintained my composure. Family peace had always been my responsibility, a role I'd accepted since childhood. What I didn't realize was how completely I'd normalized this imbalance or how spectacularly it was about to collapse. The engagement dinner was scheduled exactly 3 months before the wedding date at L'Espalier, one of Boston's most exclusive restaurants. My parents spared no expense, reserving the private dining room with its crystal chandeliers and panoramic city views. The table settings featured Katie and Jake's monogrammed initials in gold leaf, with centerpieces of white orchids and blue hydrangeas previewing their wedding colors. I arrived early, as usual, helping my mother adjust name cards and making sure the champagne was properly chilled. Katie arrived looking radiant in a cream-colored silk dress, while Jake wore a tailored navy suit that probably cost more than my monthly mortgage payment. The guest list included our immediate family, both sets of parents, the maid of honor, best man, and a few close relatives. "Sam, you look almost presentable tonight," Jake commented as I greeted them, his eyes scanning my black cocktail dress. Finally took my advice about dressing more femininely. I'd never received such advice from him, but I smiled tightly. "Lovely to see you too, Jake." The first passed pleasantly enough with appetizers and drinks. Jake's parents were polite, if somewhat reserved, his mother occasionally making comments about the perfect addition to their family, while looking directly at Katie. My sister glowed under the attention, though I noticed she'd barely touched her wine, unusual for her at family gatherings. It was during the main course when things began to shift. Jake had been drinking steadily, not enough to appear visibly intoxicated, but enough to loosen whatever filters normally constrained his comments. "So Samantha," he said loudly enough to capture everyone's attention, "Katie tells me you've just closed another big investment deal. Always working, aren't you?" "It was a good opportunity for my clients," I replied neutrally. "Amazing how some women can be so focused on money," he swirled his whiskey. "Different priorities, I guess." My father, perhaps sensing tension, attempted to change the subject. "The Patriots are looking strong this season." But Jake wasn't finished. "Did you all know Samantha actually calculated the ROI on her last relationship?" asked the poor guy about his 5-year earning projections on their third date. This was entirely fabricated. My last relationship had ended because my partner accepted a position in Chicago, and neither of us wanted long distance. I felt heat rising to my cheeks but maintained my composure. "Jake, I don't think," Katie began, but he patted her hand dismissively. "I'm just teasing, Samantha knows I respect her unique approach to life." My mother laughed nervously. "More champagne, anyone?" As dinner progressed, Jake's comments grew increasingly pointed. He referred to my apartment as my spinster pad and wondered aloud if my firm had diversity quotas that helped my career advancement. Each remark was delivered with a smile that never reached his eyes, each phrased in a way that made objection seem like an overreaction. The breaking point came during the dessert course when Jake stood to offer an impromptu toast. Everyone raised their glasses, expecting typical engagement dinner sentiments. "To my beautiful fiancé," he began appropriately enough. "Katie, you've made me the happiest man alive." He smiled down at her before continuing. "And to her remarkable sister, Samantha." I felt a sinking feeling as all eyes turned to me. We all know Samantha's the real success story in the family, professionally speaking, of course. Making partner before 30, managing millions in assets, always the smartest person in the room. There was an uncomfortable pause as Jake took another sip of his drink. "It's impressive, really. Though between us, I've always wondered if that intimidating intelligence is why she'll probably die alone with her money. No man wants to feel constantly analyzed like an underperforming stock." The silence that followed was absolute. Katie's face had drained of color. My parents looked frozen, glasses still raised awkwardly. Jake's mother was studying her plate intently while his father seemed to be suppressing a smile. I carefully set down my glass and stood, making sure my voice remained steady despite the blood pounding in my ears. I appreciate being included in your toast, Jake, but I feel I should clarify something. I maintain direct eye contact with him. Success in my career doesn't come at the expense of personal relationships, and respect is fundamental to any healthy relationship, romantic, familial, or otherwise. I turned to include everyone at the table. I've always respected Katie's choices and supported her happiness. I would expect the same courtesy from anyone who claims to love her. Jake's smile hardened. It was just a joke, Samantha. No need to turn this into a feminist manifesto. It wasn't a joke. My voice remained calm but firm. It was disrespectful not just to me, but to Katie. Suggesting that accomplished women are somehow deficient or unlovable isn't humorous. It's outdated and offensive. Sam, please, Katie's voice wavered as tears filled her eyes. You're making a scene. I'm not the one who made this scene, Katie. I gestured toward Jake, who was now glaring openly. But I won't sit here and pretend this behavior is acceptable. My father abruptly pushed back his chair. Samantha, that's enough. Richard, my mother hissed, clearly mortified. No, Diana, my father's tone was decisive. This is supposed to be a celebration. Samantha, apologize to Jake right now. I stared at him incredulously. Apologize? For what exactly? Standing up for myself against blatant disrespect. For ruining your sister's engagement dinner. My mother finally found her voice. Jake was just making a toast. Katie was openly crying now. Why do you always have to make everything about you, Sam? This is my special time. I looked around the table, stunned by the unified front against me. No one, not my parents, not Katie, certainly not Jake's family, seemed to recognize or acknowledge the inappropriateness of his comments. I think I should leave, I said quietly, gathering my purse. If you walk out now, my father's voice cut through the tension, don't expect to be at the wedding. I paused, momentarily disbelieving. You can't be serious. Dead serious, his expression confirmed it. Either you apologize to Jake right now and we put this unpleasantness behind us, or you're uninvited. Your choice. Katie's tearful plea followed. Please, Sam, just say sorry so we can move on. For me. I looked at my sister, the person I'd protected and supported unconditionally for 27 years, now asking me to accept humiliation for her convenience. That Jake, smirking slightly behind his feigned expression of injured innocence. That my parents, who had never once required Katie to apologize for anything in her life. Without another word, I walked out of the restaurant into the cool Boston night, my heels clicking against the pavement with each step that carried me away from the family that had just chosen comfort over integrity. The first text came before I reached my car. Congratulations, you've ruined everything again. Don't come crying when you realize how alone you really are, Katie. The second, from my mother. Your father and I are beyond disappointed. Call Jake first thing tomorrow to make this right. The third, from Jake himself. Family drama queens are so tedious. Katie deserves better. I sat in my car for nearly an, hands gripping the steering wheel, before I could trust myself to drive home. But in that, something crystallized within me, a recognition of a pattern I'd accepted my entire life. One that ended tonight. The drive back to my Beacon Hill apartment passed in a blur. Boston's familiar streets seemed suddenly foreign, as if the city itself had transformed along with my perspective. I parked in my designated spot, nodded mechanically to the night doorman, and rode the elevator to my 12th floor unit in silence. Inside, I kicked off my heels and poured myself a generous glass of Macallan 18, the expensive scotch I reserved for closing major deals. This qualified. The amber liquid burned satisfyingly as I sank onto my leather sofa, finally allowing the emotions I'd suppressed at dinner to surface. The hurt came first, a physical ache that spread from my chest outward. Then anger, hot and clarifying. Not just at Jake or tonight's events, but at decades of uneven expectations, at myself for enabling them. My phone buzzed continuously with messages. I silenced it without looking. Instead, I pulled my laptop closer and opened a folder I'd created years ago but never had the courage to review objectively: family finances. Inside were meticulously organized spreadsheets documenting every loan, gift, and contribution I'd made to my family over the past decade. Polished tuition supplements for Katie when she decided my parents' generous contribution wasn't enough for her semester abroad. The down payment assistance for my parents when they upgraded to a larger home after Dad's promotion. The business loan to my father last year. And most recently, the substantial wedding fund contribution. All totaled, I had given not loan, given over $380,000 to my family in the past decade. Money I'd earned through 70 work weeks and careful investing. Money they'd accepted as their due. Financial analyst to the core, I murmured to myself, taking another sip of scotch. But numbers don't lie, and these told a story of profound imbalance. At midnight, my best friend Madison called. Unlike the others, I answered. Your mom called me, she said without preamble. Something about you having a meltdown at Katie's engagement dinner. I'm coming over. 20 minutes later, Madison arrived in sweatpants and a Harvard Business School hoodie, carrying a pint of Ben & Jerry's. We'd been friends since undergrad, and she knew me better than anyone, including, apparently, my family. Spill, she commanded, handing me a spoon. I recounted the evening in detail, including Jake's toast and my parents' ultimatum. Madison's expression grew increasingly incredulous. And they want you to apologize. That's next-level gaslighting. It's a familiar pattern, I admitted. Keep the peace, Sam. Be the bigger person, Sam. Katie's just sensitive, Sam. Madison set down her spoon. You know I love your family. Your mom makes the best apple pie on the eastern seaboard. But this is bullshit, and you know it. I nodded slowly. I've been thinking about something my therapist said last year, that sometimes patterns persist because everyone plays their assigned role. And yours is family doormat. I winced at the bluntness, but she wasn't wrong. Financial support system, emotional shock absorber, professional success story they can brag about without having to accommodate any actual inconvenience. So what are you going to do? I stared at my laptop screen, at the columns of numbers that represented years of one-way generosity. I'm thinking about something dramatic. Madison raised an eyebrow. I'm listening. I manage all our family accounts. The wedding fund, Dad's business account, their investment portfolio. Legally, I have signature authority on everything. Sam, Madison's tone held both warning and curiosity. I wouldn't steal anything, I clarified quickly, but I could restrict access temporarily. That's playing with fire. Is it? Or is it finally establishing consequences for treating me like an ATM with a doormat attached? We talked until 3 a.m, refining what had started as an emotional impulse into a calculated strategy. Madison, with her legal background, helped me understand exactly what actions would be within my rights as account manager versus what could create liability. The next morning, I called in sick to work for the first time in 5 years and made an appointment with my attorney, Gerald Hoffman, for noon. Gerald's corner office overlooked Boston Harbor, a fitting backdrop for discussions about navigating treacherous waters. I laid out the situation honestly, including my family's financial entanglements and my proposed response. Let me understand correctly, Gerald said, peering over his reading glasses. You want to temporarily freeze family accounts that you legally manage, while you take some time away to reconsider these relationships. Precisely. I need to know my options and limitations. Gerald nodded thoughtfully. The business account is straightforward. As the designated manager with signature authority, you have discretion there, particularly given the documented loan arrangement with your father. The investment accounts too, since you're the advisor of record. And the wedding fund? That's more nuanced. Your parents created it, but you've made substantial contributions and grown it significantly through your management. I'd recommend documenting your rationale for any actions there particularly carefully. I spent the next hour outlining exactly what I wanted to do, with Gerald suggesting modifications to keep everything above board. By the time I left his office, I had a detailed action plan and the reassurance that while my family would certainly be furious, they would have limited legal. Back home, I opened my laptop and began researching destinations. If I was going to remove myself from this toxic dynamic, I wanted physical distance as well, somewhere I'd always wanted to visit but had repeatedly postponed. My cursor hovered over various options before settling decisively. The Maldives, private villa over crystal waters, isolated paradise, 12, time difference from Boston, perfect. I booked a 2-week stay at the Sonvajani Resort, paying the eye-watering rate without flinching. After years of sacrificing my own desires to fund others' dreams, this felt like necessary reclamation. Next came the logistics of securing the accounts. I didn't want to act rashly or vindictively, just establish clear boundaries with meaningful consequences. I created new access protocols for each account, requiring my explicit authorization for any withdrawals over $500. I documented everything meticulously, including screenshots of recent communications demonstrating the pattern of disrespect and emotional manipulation that had precipitated these changes. The final step was drafting an email to my family, something I'd send once I was already en route to the Maldives. I worked through 7 versions before arriving at the right tone. Firm but not cruel, clear but not vengeful. Dear Mom, Dad, and Katie, by the time you read this, I will be on my way to taking some much-needed time for myself. The events at the engagement dinner forced me to reevaluate our family dynamic and my role within it. I have temporarily restricted access to the family accounts I manage. All scheduled payments for essential expenses will continue automatically. However, additional withdrawals will require my authorization. This includes the wedding fund. To be clear, I am not stealing or permanently withholding anything. I am creating a pause that matches the one you've suggested in our relationship with your ultimatum. When you are ready to acknowledge the pattern of disrespect from Jake's behavior to your unified demand that I apologize for standing up for myself, I'm ready to discuss moving forward constructively. Until then, I'm removing myself as both emotional and financial cushion. I love you all, but I love myself too. Samantha. I scheduled the email for delivery during my layover in Dubai, packed 2 suitcases with resort-appropriate attire, and went to bed. Tomorrow would change everything, one way or another. Morning brought one last moment of hesitation. As I was loading my luggage into the Uber to the airport, my phone rang. My mother's name flashed on the screen. Against my better judgment, I answered. Samantha, thank goodness you picked up. Have you calmed down? Her voice carried that familiar tone of dismissive expectation. I'm quite calm, Mum. Good, because we have a situation. The florist is demanding an additional deposit for the imported pennies Katie wants, and your father says you haven't returned his calls about transferring more funds to the wedding account. No concern for my feelings. No acknowledgement of the previous night's events. Just another financial demand. I'm dealing with some things right now, Mom. What could possibly be more important than your sister's wedding? The deposit is due by end of day. In that moment, any lingering doubt evaporated. I have to go. I'll be in touch soon. I ended the call, silenced my phone, and directed the driver to Logan International Airport. It was time. Boston faded behind me as my flight climbed into the clear blue sky. For the first time in recent memory, I was putting myself first, physically removing myself from the expectations and obligations that had defined my existence for decades. The irony wasn't lost on me that I'd needed to flee halfway around the world to establish boundaries that should have been respected in my own home. The 16-hour journey with its layover in Dubai provided ample time for reflection, doubt, and ultimately, reinforcement of my resolve. During the Dubai stopover, I found a quiet corner in the business class lounge, connected to the airport Wi-Fi, and sent the pre-drafted email to my family. I also activated the new security protocols on our shared account. Within minutes, my phone exploded with notifications, calls from my parents, texts from Katie, even a message from Jake. I silenced them all and boarded my connecting flight to Malé International Airport. Arriving in the Maldives was like stepping into another dimension. The seaplane transfer from Malé to Sonvajani offered breathtaking views of the Indian Ocean's tapestry of blues, dotted with coral atolls and tiny islands. As we approached the resort, I glimpsed overwater villas extending from a lush green island, each with its own private infinity pool and water slide directly into the lagoon. My personal butler, or Mr. Friday as they called the role here, greeted me with a coconut drink and whisked me via golf cart to my villa. The expansive space featured glass floors revealing marine life below, a retractable roof for stargazing from bed, and uninterrupted ocean views that stretched to the horizon. Will Miss Michelle require anything else? The butler asked after showing me the villa's features. Privacy, I replied with a small smile. I'm here to disconnect. Alone at last, I changed into a swimsuit and lowered myself from my private deck into the warm, crystal-clear water. Floating on my back, staring at the endless sky, I felt simultaneously liberated and terrified. What had I done? Was this brave or selfish? The boundaries between justified self-preservation and vengeful retaliation seemed suddenly blurred. Later that evening, as I sat on my deck watching the sunset paint the sky in impossible pinks and oranges, I finally checked my phone. The barrage was exactly what I'd expected. Mom, what have you done? Call immediately. Dad, this is completely unacceptable. Unlock the accounts now. Katie, you've ruined everything. The florist canceled because payment didn't go through. I hate you. Jake, real mature Samantha. Using money to control people proves everything I said about you. And then, more ominously, a notification from my banking app. Multiple attempted withdrawals declined. They were already trying to circumvent the restrictions. I opened my laptop and logged into the bank's secure portal to check the details. 7 attempted withdrawals from the wedding fund in escalating amounts, the largest for $28,000, presumably for the venue deposit that would soon be due. My hands trembled slightly as I composed a brief response, addressing only my parents. I received notification of attempted withdrawals. As stated in my email, I have not stolen anything. The funds remain exactly where they've always been. I'm taking time to process recent events and will be in touch when I'm ready to discuss moving forward. Please respect my need for space. I hesitated before adding, the accounts will remain frozen until I receive acknowledgement of the disrespect shown at the dinner, including a sincere apology from Jake. Setting my phone to Do Not Disturb, I ordered room service and ate dinner on my deck beneath a canopy of stars. The contrast between my current surroundings and the emotional turmoil I'd left behind could not have been more stark. Here was tranquility and beauty. There, chaos of my own making. The next morning brought more messages, increasingly desperate and angry. My father threatened legal action. My mother invoked family loyalty and emotional blackmail. Teddy oscillated between rage and tearful pleading. Jake's messages grew increasingly hostile, confirming my assessment of his character. I maintained radio silence, allowing myself to be present in paradise while they confronted the consequences of years of taking me for granted. Each morning, I swam with manta rays in the lagoon. Each afternoon, I read books on my sun deck or enjoyed spa treatments. Each evening, I watched the sunset with a glass of wine, feeling the grip of obligation loosen slightly with each passing day. On the 3rd day, an unexpected message appeared from my cousin Rebecca. Not sure what happened, but Katie's telling everyone you stole the wedding money and fled the country. Sounds like BS to me. You okay? I sent her a brief explanation of the actual situation. Within hours, other relatives and family friends began reaching out with similar questions and, surprisingly, messages of support. Always thought Jake was a pompous ass, wrote my Uncle Thomas. Taking financial control was maybe extreme, but I get why you needed to make a statement, messaged my childhood friend Eliza, who remained close to our family. Most unexpectedly, my father's business partner William wrote, "Your dad's furious, but between us, he needed a wake-up call about how he treats you versus Katie. Take the time you need." By the end of my first week in paradise, the narrative was shifting. My mother's best friend confided that my parents were frantically downsizing the wedding, and that Katie was having second thoughts about Jake after some things came out during arguments about the money. Madison, my most loyal source of updates, reported that Katie had posted a tearful Instagram story about her sister's betrayal, only to delete it when comments overwhelmingly sided with me once the full context. The tide's turning, Madison told me during our one scheduled call. Your dad called me asking if I knew how to reach you to discuss reasonable terms. Think they're realizing you're serious. On day 9, my phone displayed a notification I'd been both dreading and anticipating, an email from my parents with the subject line, "Apology." I opened it while sitting on my deck, feet dangling in my private pool, the ocean stretching endlessly before me. The content was disappointing but unsurprising. Samantha, while we still believe your actions were extreme and unnecessary, we understand you felt hurt at the dinner. If an apology for any misunderstanding will resolve this situation, consider this that apology. Please unlock the accounts immediately. Vendors are threatening to cancel, and this standoff has gone on long enough. Mom and Dad. Not a single acknowledgement of the actual issues. No recognition of Jake's behavior or their enabling of it. Just a non-apology designed to get the money flowing again with minimal inconvenience to themselves. My response was brief. Thank you for reaching out. However, this doesn't address the core issues. I'm not looking for a perfunctory apology for any misunderstanding. Need acknowledgement of the specific disrespect shown by Jake and the unfairness of demanding I apologize for standing up for myself. When you're ready to have that conversation sincerely, I'm ready to listen. The response came within minutes. You're being unreasonable. This is your sister's wedding. I didn't reply. Instead, I closed my laptop and slid down my villa's water slide directly into the warm lagoon below, allowing the crystal waters to wash away the remnants of guilt that still clung to me. For the first time since childhood, I was not responsible for fixing everyone else's problems. The realization was as terrifying as it was liberating. The wedding date approached. I extended my stay at Sonvajani for another week, using my own separate funds rather than any of the frozen accounts. If my family thought I was spending their money on my tropical escape, they were mistaken. Another assumption that revealed how little they understood me. The night before what should have been Katie's wedding day, I sat on my deck beneath a full moon that illuminated the gentle waves below. In less than 24 hours, my sister would either be getting married under dramatically scaled-back circumstances or facing a postponement due to my action. The weight of that responsibility sat heavily on my shoulders despite the rightness of my position. I loved Katie, despite everything. I wanted her happiness, just not at the continued expense of my dignity. As if summoned by my thoughts, my phone displayed an incoming call from a number I knew by heart, Katie's. After nearly 2 weeks of ignoring her messages, something compelled me to answer. "Hello, Katie." The line was silent for so long I thought she might have hung up. Then, very softly, "Sam, you actually picked up." I did. I kept my voice neutral, waiting. What came next would change everything. I postponed the wedding. Katie's voice cracked as she delivered this bombshell. For a moment, I couldn't speak. Of all the possible scenarios I'd imagined while in the Maldives, Katie actually canceling her wedding hadn't been among them. "You what, Katie, I never wanted." "It's not just because of the money," she interrupted, her voice stronger now. Though obviously that was a factor when vendors started pulling out. I sat up straighter in my lounge chair, the stunning nighttime panorama of the Indian Ocean momentarily forgotten. "Then why?" A deep sigh came through the connection. "After you left that night, things got worse. Jake was furious not just about what you said, but that Dad initially defended you before demanding you apologize." "Dad defended me?" This was news. For about 30 seconds, he said Jake's toast was a bit mush before Mom gave him that look and he switched to blaming you for overreacting. I closed my eyes, imagining the scene. My father had briefly seen the truth before retreating to the safety of our established family dynamic. Katie continued, her words coming faster now. "After you froze the accounts, Jake completely lost it. Called you every horrible name imaginable. Said the Michelle women were all," she stopped abruptly. "We're all what?" "It doesn't matter. What matters is I saw a side of him I've been ignoring. The way he talks about women, about money. Sam, he said he'd always planned to get your financial clause out of family money after we were married." The revelation hung between us. Jake had apparently seen me as an obstacle to accessing the family wealth I'd helped build and protect. "I'm sorry, Katie, and I was, though not for my actions." "I should be apologizing to you," she said quietly. "Everyone should. The things Jake said about you at the dinner, I knew they were wrong, but I was so focused on having my perfect wedding that I let it slide. I've been letting things slide for years." For the next hour, we talked more honestly than we had since childhood. Katie admitted she'd noticed Jake's dismissive attitude toward women he considered threats, particularly successful, independent women like me. She confessed to silencing her own discomfort when he made similar comments about her career aspirations, suggesting she'd obviously quit her marketing job once they started a family. "I thought it was normal," Katie said. "Mom always deferred to Dad about money, even though she's the one with the MBA she never used. I thought that's just what happens when you get married." "It doesn't have to be," I replied softly. I know that now. There was new conviction in her voice. Watching how Jake reacted when he couldn't access the money he felt entitled to, it was like a mask slipped. My throat tightened. "So what happens now?" "I told everyone the wedding is postponed indefinitely. Mom's having daily migraines. Dad's oscillating between rage at you and second thoughts about Jake. And Jake," she paused, "Jake's showing his true colors to everyone. He actually suggested I contest Grandma's will since she left her jewelry collection to you instead of me." "He what?" "Our grandmother had left me her vintage jewelry collection because of my genuine interest in its history and my promise to preserve it, while Katie received her significantly more valuable art collection." "Exactly. It's like I'm seeing everything clearly for the first time, including how we've all treated you." Rain had begun to fall gently on my villa's roof, the rhythmic pattering a soothing counterpoint to this emotionally charged conversation. I'm not coming back for another week, I told her. I need this time. I know, just don't cut me out completely. I want to fix this, really fix it, not just paper over it to get the money back. After we hung up, I sat watching lightning illuminate the distant horizon, feeling the first tentative unfurling of hope. One honest conversation couldn't erase decades of inequality, but it was a beginning. The next day brought a flood of communications. My father sent a terse email acknowledging that perhaps Jake's comments were inappropriate, but maintaining that my response was disproportionate and financially irresponsible. My mother left a tearful voicemail about family healing that somehow still included a timeline for unfreezing the account. Most surprisingly, I received a message from Jake's mother, Caroline Thompson. Samantha, I owe you an apology. I sat silently at that dinner while Jake spoke to you disrespectfully, something I've allowed too often in his life. Whatever happens between him and Katie, please know I recognize my part in this situation. The wedding day came and went. Madison reported that my parents had spent it stress cleaning the house, while Katie took a weekend trip to Cape Cod with friends. Jake apparently went golfing and got embarrassingly drunk at the country club bar, loudly complaining about frigid career women ruining perfectly good marriages before they even start. By day 12 of my Maldives sojourn, the landscape back home had shifted dramatically. Katie had moved out of the apartment she shared with Jake and temporarily back into our parents' house. My father's business partner had convinced him to consult a different financial advisor about restructuring company accounts to prevent future vulnerabilities. My mother had joined a women's support group at her friend's suggestion, allegedly to help cope with the wedding cancellation, but, according to Madison, actually addressing deeper issues about enabling unhealthy family dynamics. And me? I extended my stay again, using the time to reflect on my own role in maintaining our dysfunctional family system. I'd enabled their financial dependence while resenting the emotional imbalance, a realization both uncomfortable and necessary. On my final evening in Paradise, I received an email from my father that showed the first real progress. Samantha, your mother and I have been doing some difficult reflection. While we still believe freezing the accounts was extreme, we understand it came after years of us taking your financial and emotional support for granted. Jake showed concerning qualities when faced with adversity, and we're grateful Katie recognized this before making a legal commitment. That recognition might not have happened without your actions, however unorthodox. We would like to discuss reorganizing family finances when you return, with clear boundaries and expectations for everyone. Your sister especially wants to establish her own financial independence. We miss you and look forward to your return. Dad. Not a perfect apology, but genuine progress. I opened my laptop and made a single change to the family accounts that unfroze my parents' personal account but kept the others restricted pending in-person discussions. Then I sent a brief reply. Thank you, Dad. This means a lot. I'll be home on Thursday, perhaps dinner on Friday to talk just the four of us. His response came quickly, we'll be there. Your mother is already planning the menu. As I packed my suitcases, preparing to return to Boston and whatever new family dynamic awaited me, I felt neither triumphant nor anxious. Instead, I experienced something unexpected, hope that sometimes burning a bridge creates space to build a better one. My return to Boston felt surreal after 3 weeks in Paradise. The familiar skyline greeted me as my taxi crossed the Tobin Bridge, the afternoon sun glinting off the Hancock Tower. Home looked exactly the same, but I wasn't. I spent Thursday night in my apartment, unpacking and preparing for the family dinner the following evening. Madison came over with takeout and demanded details about both the Maldives and my new perspective. So you're really going through with the dinner? She asked, reaching for another spring roll. No lingering urge to extend your one-woman rebellion indefinitely. I smiled, thinking of the crystal waters and peace I'd left behind. The rebellion served its purpose. Now it's time for reconstruction. Just don't backslide into Samantha the human doormat, she warned. 3 weeks of self-actualization can evaporate quickly under proper Boston family guilt. I've changed my emergency contact to you for a reason, I replied. If I text breadsticks, stage an intervention immediately. We laughed, but beneath the humor lay genuine concern. Changing entrenched family patterns wouldn't happen overnight, no matter how dramatic the catalyst. Friday evening arrived with uncomfortable speed. I chose my outfit carefully, a navy dress that projected confidence without seeming defensive, paired with grandmother's pearls as a subtle reminder of my separate legacy within the family. My parents' Beacon Hill brownstone looked warm and inviting as I approached, golden light spilling from windows that had witnessed decades of family history. I paused on the steps, took a deep breath, and rang the bell rather than using my key, a small but deliberate chose. My mother opened the door, her expression a complex mixture of relief, love, wariness, and something new, respect. "Samantha," she embraced me stiffly at first, then with genuine emotion. "You look wonderful. That Maldives sun agrees with you." My father appeared behind her, hands in his pockets. "Welcome home, Sam." His usual confidence seemed dimmed, uncertainty having taken its place. Katie emerged last, hovering hesitantly in the foyer until our eyes met. Then she rushed forward, hugging me fiercely. "I've missed you so much," she whispered. The awkwardness dissipated somewhat as we moved to the dining room, where my mother had prepared all my favorites: roast chicken with lemon and herbs, garlic mashed potatoes, haricots verts with almonds. A peace offering in culinary. "No Jake tonight?" I asked Katie as we took our seats, aiming for neutrality. "No Jake ever again," she replied firmly. "We're officially done. His things are out of the apartment, and I'm moving back in next week." My mother poured wine with slightly trembling hands. "We thought it best to focus on family tonight. There's much to discuss, including how we move forward financially," my father added, direct as always. "I assume that's why the business account remains frozen." "Richard," my mother cautioned, "we agreed to start with personal matters." "It's fine," I said, meeting my father's gaze. "Yes, I want to discuss restructuring our financial entanglements. But first, I think we need to address the patterns that led us here." What followed was the most honest family conversation of our lives. My mother admitted that she'd always encouraged me to be the responsible one, because she recognized abilities in me that she had suppressed in herself to fit my father's expectations. My father acknowledged using my financial expertise while often dismissing my emotional needs. Katie confessed to exploiting our parents' favoritism while resenting the lower expectations it created for her. And I accepted my own responsibility for enabling dependencies while building resentment instead of establishing healthy boundaries. "I always thought being needed was the same as being valued," I admitted. "Managing everyone's finances gave me leverage when emotional equity wasn't available." "We put too much on you," my mother said quietly. "I see that now." My father cleared his throat uncomfortably. "The business can engage a proper financial advisor going forward. You shouldn't have to manage family accounts and your career simultaneously." "And I'm getting my own financial advisor too," Katie added. "Time to grow up." The conversation wasn't seamless. Old patterns emerged: my father's authoritative tone when discussing next steps, my mother's peacemaking instincts when tensions rose, Katie's occasional slide into victimhood, my own tendency to problem solve rather than express feelings. But beneath the familiar choreography was new awareness, each of us caching ourselves and adjusting. As dessert was served, my grandmother's apple tart recipe, my mother addressed the elephant in the room. "You were right about Jake. We should have listened sooner." "How did you finally see it?" I asked gently. Katie looked down at her plate. "After you left, he showed sides of himself I'd been ignoring, controlling, entitled, casually cruel when challenged. The money situation just accelerated the inevitable. He called me a financial terrorist," I said with a small smile, trying to lighten the moment. To my surprise, my father laughed. "He called me worse when I finally suggested Katie might be better off without him. The man has no poker face when money's involved." "None of us handled this well," my mother sighed, "but I keep thinking what might have happened if this side of him hadn't emerged until after they were married." My 3 weeks in the Maldives had given me perspective that allowing them to see Jake's true nature before wedding vows were exchanged was worth every uncomfortable moment since. Later, as I helped clear the table, Katie followed me into the kitchen, closing the door behind us. "There's something I didn't want to say in front of Mom and Dad," she said quietly. "After everything imploded, Jake got really drunk and admitted he'd been planning to get control of the family finances after we married. Said Dad was financial deadweight because of the business struggles, and you were an obstacle to accessing what he called the Michelle fortune." I nearly dropped the plates I was holding. "Fortune, we're comfortable, but hardly the Rockefellers. Apparently his family's money is mostly gone, appearances maintained through massive debt. He saw our family as his financial salvation." She looked both embarrassed and angry, and I was too love-struck to notice. I set down the dishes and embraced my sister. We all have blind spots, Katie. Thank you, she whispered, for loving me enough to risk me hating you. When I left that night, something fundamental had shifted. The Michel family would never return to its previous configuration, but perhaps the new structure would be sturdier, more balanced. In my apartment, I poured a nightcap and stepped onto my small balcony overlooking the city. My phone chimed with a text from Madison, "Breadsticks alert." I smiled and replied, "No intervention needed, reconstruction proceeding cautiously but well." The night before leaving the Maldives, I'd met an older woman at the resort's beach bar. After several drinks, I'd shared a sanitized version of my family drama. Her response had stayed with me. Sometimes the bravest thing isn't running away or even standing your ground, it's returning to rebuild once the necessary destruction is complete. Standing under the Boston stars, I finally understood what she meant. 6 months after my Maldives escape, Boston was in the full flush of spring. Cherry blossoms lined Commonwealth Avenue, and the public garden glowed with fresh greenery and early tulips. I'd suggested meeting Katie there for our now regular Saturday coffee, a new tradition born from our reconstructed relationship. She was already waiting at our usual bench, 2 take-up cups in hand. At 27, my sister looked both younger and somehow more mature than before, the paradox of authentic growth. "Perfect timing," she said, handing me my latte. "I was just about to call you with news." "Good news, I hope." I settled beside her, enjoying the warmth of spring sunshine after Boston's brutal winter. "I got the promotion," her smile was radiant. "Marketing director for the entire East Coast division. And I negotiated for the salary I deserve, just like you taught me." I clinked my cup against hers. "Congratulations, that's incredible, Katie. Couldn't have done it without my financial confidence coach." She bumped my shoulder affectionately. Who would have thought my workaholic big sister's spreadsheet obsession would rub off on me? We'd come so far from the tearful, accusatory calls during my self-imposed exile. After the family dinner that marked my return, Katie and I had committed to rebuilding our relationship on equal footing. Weekly coffees became the foundation of a friendship that had previously been overshadowed by rivalry and resentment. "Have you told Mom and Dad yet?" I asked. "Dad first. He actually got emotional, said he was proud of me for building my own path." She shook her head wonderingly. "Mom's hosting that charity luncheon today, so I'll tell her tonight." Our parents had undergone their own transformations. My father had indeed engaged a professional financial advisor for his business, which was now slowly recovering under more transparent management. My mother had continued with her women's group, gradually reclaiming parts of her identity that had been subsumed by family roles. They weren't perfect, no one is, but they were trying. "Speaking of financial news," I said, "the last of the wedding vendor refunds cleared yesterday. The account is officially closed." The wedding fund, once the center of our family crisis, had been methodically dismantled over months. Most vendors had returned deposits once Katie officially canceled. The non-refundable portions had been donated to a domestic violence organization at Katie's suggestion, a decision that surprised and moved all of us. "Good riddance," Katie said firmly. "Best money never spent." "No regrets." I studied her face, still occasionally worried that my actions had robbed her of happiness rather than protected her from a mistake. "About Jake? None. About how everything went down," she considered. "I wish we could have gotten there without the nuclear option, but honestly, Sam, I'm not sure we would have. Some lessons require drastic t-shirts." In the aftermath of my financial freeze and Katie's canceled wedding, our family had entered therapy together, another unprecedented step in Michel family history. Dr. Levine had guided us through months of uncomfortable conversations about expectations, favoritism, respect, and boundary. "Did I tell you Jake's engaged again?" Katie mentioned casually, tossing her empty cup into a nearby recycling bin. "Already? It's been 6 months. To Melissa Harrington. Her father owns half the waterfront development properties Jake's been trying to get his hands on for years." She rolled her eyes. "Apparently he found another fortune to pursue." I whistled low. "Poor Melissa." I sent her a gift basket with a note suggesting she get a prenup. Anonymous, of course. "Katie Michel, that's deliciously devious." She grinned. "Learn from the best." Running away to a tropical paradise and freezing family assets set a high bar for dramatic gesture. We laughed together, the memory now transformed from raw wound to shared story, painful but ultimately healing. As we walked through the garden, Katie updated me on her apartment renovations and new dating life, proceeding cautiously with a veterinarian who, refreshingly, made less money than she did. I shared news about my recent promotion to senior partner at my firm, the first female to achieve that position. "Oh, I almost forgot," Katie said suddenly. "Mom and Dad want to know if you're bringing Madison to the summer house for Memorial Day weekend." The family's Cape Cod cottage had been the site of countless childhood memories, but in recent years, I'd often made excuses to minimize my time there. This year would be different. Actually, I was thinking of bringing someone else. I've been seeing someone for a few months now. Katie stopped walking. "What? How did I not know this?" "We've been taking it slow. His name is Daniel. He's a professor at Harvard Medical School, and I searched for the right word, kind, genuinely kind." "Sam, this is huge." She linked her arm through mine as we continued walking. "Mom will be thrilled. She's been worried you've sworn off relationships entirely after the Jake debacle." "I considered it," I admitted, "but that would be giving Jake's toxicity too much power." We completed our loop around the garden and paused at the entrance, preparing to head our separate ways, Katie to a friend's birthday lunch, me to a rare afternoon off with a new novel. "Same time next week?" Katie asked. "Wouldn't miss it." I hugged her goodbye, still marveling at how natural these affectionate gestures had become between us. As I walked home through Boston Common, I reflected on the extraordinary journey of the past year. From the engagement dinner confrontation to my tropical escape, from frozen accounts to thawed family relationships, each step had led to this new equilibrium. The financial accounts were now properly separated. My parents managed their own retirement funds with professional guidance. Katie had established independent savings and investment accounts that she proudly maintained herself. My father's business operated with transparent accounting practices. And I no longer served as the family bank, though I remained available for advice when asked respectfully. More importantly, the emotional ledger had been rebalanced. My opinions were heard in family discussions. Katie and I supported each other as equals rather than as designated roles in a family drama. My parents had begun treating us as the adults we'd become, with individual strengths and unique needs. When I reached my apartment, I found a package waiting, a birthday gift from my parents, though my birthday was still 2 weeks away. Inside was a leather-bound travel journal with a handwritten note. "For your next adventure, wherever it may take you. This time with our blessing and without family drama necessitating your escape. All our love, Mom and Dad." Tucked inside the journal was a confirmation for a week's stay at Sonvajani, the same Maldives resort where I'd fled scheduled for my birthday week. But unlike my solo journey of necessity, this reservation was for 2. That evening, during our weekly family video call, I thanked my parents for their thoughtful gift. "It was your mother's idea," my father said. "She thought it was time you experienced those islands without a family crisis overshadowing their beauty. And perhaps with better company this time," my mother added with a knowing smile. After the call ended, I stood on my balcony watching the city lights, thinking about the parallel lives we all navigate, the ones we're given versus the ones we choose, the families we're born into versus the relationships we build. My escape to the Maldives had been an act of desperation disguised as empowerment. The freezing of accounts had been leverage masquerading as boundary setting. But from those imperfect actions had come genuine change, proof that sometimes the right thing emerges from choices that feel wrong in the moment. I'd learned that true financial independence isn't just about money management, but about the courage to withstand disapproval from those whose approval you've always sought. That family love can survive even dramatic recalibrations if the foundation is strong enough. That sometimes you have to break a system to fix it. Most importantly, I'd learned that apologizing when you've done nothing wrong costs something far more valuable than money's. It costs self-respect, the one currency that, once depleted, bankrupts all other aspects of life. As the stars appear over Boston Harbor, I thought about how far we all come from that disastrous engagement dinner. The journey hadn't been easy or straightforward, but it had been necessary, leading not to the ending of family ties but to their renewal on healthier terms. So if you're facing your own family ultimatum, wondering whether to apologize for standing your ground or take a dramatic stand, remember this. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do for yourself and for them is refuse to participate in dynamics that diminish anyone's humanity. The path might lead temporarily away from those you love, but if the connection is genuine, it will survive the journey and emerge stronger for having been tested. Have you ever had to choose between keeping the peace and standing your ground? Drop a comment below about how you handled family expectations versus personal boundaries. And if this story resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share with someone who might need permission to prioritize their self-respect. Thank you for listening to my journey, and remember, the most important relationship you'll ever have is the one with yourself.